So back on my 2015 Ram, it's the 1500 and it has the 5.7 Hemi, and we're doing spark plugs. I do have the valve covers out. There's a reason for that. We'll talk about that in just a second. But doing the spark plugs is fairly simple for the most part. You do need a special tool. You don't have to have it. I don't know what I did with it. Right over here, but it makes life so much easier. So this is the Gear 8 gear wrench swivel spark plug 5/8, part number 80546. Makes life so much easier getting them in that tight spaces over there. So definitely recommend getting that tool. Coil packs have two 10 millimeters. I disconnected all the connectors and all that stuff. Got everything out. Now, you have to do a lot of work to get to the spark plugs, and at that point, I mean, you're just right there for the valve covers. Now, if they're not leaking, leave them alone. But in my case, I had a leak in the back of the engine, and this is the passenger side. I was looking straight up. I had a small little seep, nothing too major. I ignored it for a while, but considering that I'm doing the spark plugs, this is the perfect time to actually address the valve cover and fix that leak. So now for the valve covers, fairly simple, 8 millimeters all the way around. When you get to the back of the engine over there, just kind of use a small little 1/4 inch ratchet with an 8 millimeter. Just like so, and I'll be able to get all that out. As far as being able to get everything out, I disconnected the connectors for the ECU, fuel injectors, coil packs obviously, and just kind of got the wiring harness all loose. Tucked up over this little pole. This actually is what holds that beauty cover for the engine. Just got it tucked up right over there. I made sure I kind of blew everything off, so when we popped over the valve cover, no junk and crap got into the engine. Once you do that, I mean, it's a little tricky to get out. Mine was stuck pretty good. Hit it a couple of times with a dead blow, but finally took a screwdriver and just pried it very lightly because you don't want to crack or break the valve cover or put nicks into the cylinder head. But popped it off and we were good. So now my valve cover is actually drying off. I decided to clean it. It just had some gunk and crud on it. But I just want to note that 114,000 miles and this engine looks great. My last truck, which was also had the Hemi on it, I mean, that was pretty kicked up bad. It was neglected, but this one looks like it was maintained. But moving forward, so the valve cover is kind of drying off outside. Went with the Fel-Pro. It's like $20 on Rock Auto. Comes with the spark plug tube seals. But unfortunately, that kit does not come with something very important, and that's these grommets for the 8 millimeter bolts, which is rather unfortunate. If you're going to do the valve cover gasket, make sure you buy these grommets. They're separate. Here's the part number, ES72596. As I have found in my experience, these tend to disintegrate, and more times than not, this is actually the culprit of your leak at the back of the engine. So that's what we're going to do. Now to get these little grommets off, pretty much what I'll do is I'll take a side cutters, bite down on it. It's not going to affect this metal because, well, I guess the metal is stronger than that. But I pretty much break the grommet like I did so over here. And when I do that, this thing pretty much comes apart. And we're good to go. And as far as putting the new ones on, just dab a little silicone paste and this thing will slide right in. So fairly simple. So let me go swap all these out. Now, as far as popping on the new ones, you could use silicone paste, but these are actually sliding on pretty easy. So just kind of press them in like so, push them down. So let me do that a bunch more times. Valve cover, cleaned it up, looked pretty good. And like I talked about, the engine was really clean. This was clean too. I've seen valve covers where it's just scaled up just from neglect and engine issues. But one thing I will say about changing the valve cover gaskets, it kind of gives you an idea of, you know, how your engine was maintained. And this makes me feel good. This makes me feel real good. Now this is simple as just popping it in the little grommets and pushing them down just into the little channels. Very simple. I will say inspect your gaskets. I've actually had gaskets that I bought and they just had a slight little tear, didn't see it, didn't notice it. I mean, it didn't separate it, but then it just leaked like crazy. So got that. I'm going to put in the spark plug tube seals just like so. I think that's what they're called. I'm just thinking of the same name as what Honda calls them, but I guess it's the same thing. And then our grommets, we get to feed these in just like so. And they'll just slide in. They're kind of self-capting. All right, so let's finish this up and let's go get to the spark plugs. So for our spark plugs, NGK Iridium, that's the part number. I am a firm believer that whatever the engine came with is what you put in there. Now, I know some people put some colder, warmer plugs, I guess if you're doing some performance or modding, but honestly, if you're going to be running a stock engine and not doing anything else, just put these in. They run fantastic and you won't have any issues. And stick to the brand that it calls for. Don't put in those, what is it, those triple spark ones or other junks. I like NGKs. I just want to take a look at them, make sure they're good. Also, it's a good idea to kind of check the spark to make sure these things didn't get damaged. So we should be good. So let's get them on the engine. Now this is where this tool is fantastic. It's magnetic. It's a very strong magnet. And then because it's all swivelly and stuff, I mean, this one is easy. I already put the first one in. But we just kind of put it in there. Don't drop it so you don't hit the electrode and change your gap. And then I just snug them in until, well, they're snug. And then we'll do the whole torque spec and everything. Same thing through the back. Nothing fancy about that. It's a little tighter, but it'll still maneuver through. So let me finish this up. So ran all them in. They're hand tight. And now we got to torque them. I torque them to 15 foot-pounds. I think it's 13 to 15. You don't want to go over 15 just because, well, you don't want to strip them. And just let me finish hand tightening this like so. I don't do a lot of torquing, which is a bad habit, but one thing I do torque is spark plugs. Gives you a guarantee that that crush washer is crushed and seated, or seating, whatever the word is. So let's get that to click. So now for installing the valve cover, it's kind of the same, well, it's pretty much the reverse of taking it out. The key thing to remember is to make sure that this wiring harness is tucked up. Ideally, having two hands would make it easier. Or what I've done in the past is use a bungee cord and just kind of hold that, which I might see if I have something, because if we could hold that up, it slides right in. You don't want to roll the gasket, so the easier you can make it slide in, the better your life will be. So let me get these wires tucked in. Let me see if I come up with something, and I'll show you when I'm done. So I just used these little straps that I got, tied it up to there, got that up, and then on the back of the fuel rail, right in the back over there, I have the wiring harness sitting up there, so I got plenty of room just to slide it in. I'll just tuck these over. Well, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. We should be able to get that slid in. So that slid in real smooth. And now what I'll do is just tighten these 8mm just by hand to get them started. At least that'll let me seat the gasket and everything in place. But I mean, as you can see how much room we gain just by tucking the wiring harness up. So we're good over there. I'll tighten this up, put the coil packs on, button this up, and then I'll start on the driver's side. Looks to be a little more involved. I'm not going to film everything, but I'll show the highlights or tips and tricks that I come up with as we go. Okay, so got started on the driver's side, and yeah, there is no room. It is not easy. It is definitely not like the 3rd gen Rams. So that's going to be challenging to do, and I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like messing with it. So here's my thought process. I do need to change the spark plugs, which we could get in there. We could change the spark plugs. That's really no big deal. But the valve cover, I've looked underneath, I've looked everywhere. That one is not leaking. The driver's side valve cover is not leaking. So I'm going to go with the philosophy of if it's not broke, don't fix it. The passenger side was the one that's leaking. We've addressed that. This one is dry. It's not even seeping. So I'm going to leave that alone. Pray that when I take out my coil packs that there's no oil on the boots, and go about my merry way. So if anything exciting happens, I'll turn the camera back on. But in this situation, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Got it mostly put back together, fired it up, no ticks, nothing misfire or anything. So everything went pretty good. So now the valve cover, I went underneath, I checked, saw no leaks or anything like that. So it's dry as a bone. And when I pulled out each boot, they were dry as a bone, spark plugs are dry. So I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm not gonna mess with it. I mean, it's real simple, as every time I do my oil change, I'll just crawl underneath the driver's side and check to see if I have any leaks. So I'm not gonna mess with it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Right now, I'm just gonna finish tightening up my engine bay, do a little cleaning on it, and be done. So things to remember: number one, that tool is a must. Made it so much easier. If not, I mean, you can use some swivels and some extensions that will work, and a good 10 and 8 millimeter, and you should get the job done. So thanks for watching, and we'll keep fixing things.